So yeah, one of our latest partners that we're super proud of to having added as one of our partners is Alejandro Zamorano from Revival Cacao. We started, well, we have been chatting for a while, and we have started to work together as of the beginning of this year with the first shipment with beans all from the Mexican Tabasco region, 2 fermented cacaos, and 1, well, unfermented so-called lavado cacao, which will be the topic of today. Alejandro will take us through a presentation of 40 minutes. After this, there's going to be 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A. In the meantime, during the call, you're more than welcome to put your questions in the chat, and we're going to try to cover it all. Then lastly, the call will be also recorded for people that can't be in the meeting today. So yeah, well, then last thing, Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is the sound fine? I guess no echo.
Yeah,
and I see.
We can hear you.
So, so yeah, and thanks for joining. My name is Alejandro Zamorano, and I will briefly talk about Lavado cacao and about a research project that we have been carrying out for over a year now. And I will show you the results that, the health benefits of Lavado and a little bit of the history. So let's jump in to the presentation. Okay, so we start. One moment. Okay. Yeah. So, well, we will start by asking ourselves if cacao was fermented from the very beginning. It's a very interesting question, because when you read history books, or for example, when you read this very good book, The True History of Chocolate, everybody takes for granted that cacao was fermented from the very beginning. And by very beginning, I mean the ancient Mesoamerican civilizations, right? So many books just take it for granted. They say somehow they had to ferment cacao, but maybe it was not the case. So the interesting thing here is that cacao has been grown and consumed in Mexico for nearly 4,000 years. So it's one of the oldest origins, and probably the oldest continuously grown origin in the world. So the question arises, if that's the case, why in Mexico farmers don't know how to ferment? Why do, the women that prepare the ancient cacao-based beverages in Mexico, why they use unfermented cacao? So the oldest origin in the world that it's still being grown, why nobody knows how to ferment? That's the question that puzzled me when I first started working with cacao in Mexico, right? So basically the question of the presentation is, did ancient civilizations such as the Mocaya, Olmec, Maya, or Mexica know something that we don't? Probably yes. Let's keep into account that the word cacao and the word chocolate are of Mexican origin. So people in Mexico do have something to say, I guess, in all things cacao and chocolate, right? So that's why I started questioning, okay, during or after the European conquest, people think that brainless savage warriors came from Spain to conquer Mexico. Actually, you had college-educated people coming here. So even Hernán Cortés, I think, was a lawyer, and all the priests were college-educated. So what they did when they came to Mexico was to record and write down everything they saw, everything. They were obsessed with what they were uncovering, so they registered everything they could. And I took the effort to check what they had to say about cacao 500 years ago. So you have a lot of accounts dealing with chocolate. They were constantly describing chocolate beverages, the ingredients they were using, how they were preparing, I mean, how the Aztec were preparing all the beverages. But I wanted to see if somebody cared enough to describe the farms, to describe the post-harvest, in order to uncover how cacao was processed, the post-harvest, basically, because in the 18th century, we are already seeing that cacao was fermented in other countries, in Jamaica or in the Caribbean, you know. But I wanted to check what was the first thing that the first Europeans saw after coming to Mexico. It's like a picture before their civilization started to collapse, right? So the most accurate description I found was from Fernández de Oviedo in 1526. So 599 years ago. And this guy had this to say, returning to the fruit of cocoa, cacao, cacahuat, for by all means, for by all three names it is called, I say that when it is harvested and almonds are ripe, this is from February onward, blah, blah, blah. After removing the almonds, they set them in the sun for a few hours each day so they may cure. So that's the first ever description of a post-harvest process. It's ancient Spanish, so we don't really know what cure means, but here I don't really see any description of any fermentation process at all, right? So, and they are constantly calling them almonds. And I will go forward a little. What looks more as an almond? This is lavado. It looks like an almond, especially if you see here below, it's white from the inside because the cacao they saw was probably criollo. So when it's orange in the outside and white inside, I mean, it's an almond, right? When it's, I don't know if I have a photo fermented, but fermented is more gray, right? More brown. So this looks like an almond for me. So they were basically calling them almonds, right? Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So this is the first description that we have of a post-harvest. So then we have descriptions of the effect, how it affected people when drinking chocolate. All this is you need to help me figure out how cacao was processed in the past. I think it's lavado. I will give you my reasons. And this is the beginning of these reasons, right? So we have Bernardino de Sahagún that says that when it is new, if one drinks a great deal, it causes intoxication. Taken in moderation, it cools and refreshes. He's mentioning the chocolate, right? New means when you're not used to it. If one drinks a great deal of it, it causes intoxication. Intoxication doesn't mean in 16th century Spain that it's bad for you. It says basically that it alters your mood. That's what he says, you know? It's mood altering. Why? Because keep in mind that Europeans in the 16th century were not used to coffee, to tea, to chocolate. They didn't consume any alkaloids. And as we will see later, unfermented cacao lavado has a great deal of theobromine and caffeine, much higher than fermented. So they were basically, they were high by drinking chocolate, right? So that's the first description of the effects of taking chocolate. So, and then El Conquistador Anónimo, he mentions this drink is the most wholesome and substantial of any food or beverage in the world, because whoever drinks a cup of this liquor can go through the day without taking anything else, even if he's on a journey. Again, the first Red Bull, you know, the first energy drink was pure 100% cacao, right? Because they had no sugar. Well, this one is not important. He mentions that there are several varieties, 4 varieties, the Francisco Hernandez, and one was more appropriate to use as a coin, because remember, it's not a myth, it was used as a coin with a lot of problems, but it was legal tender, so to speak, right? So, and then this guy, this one is interesting because the José de Acosta describes the first ever cacao farm. And farms in Mexico are pretty similar to what it was described almost 500 years ago. He mentions The tree that bears this fruit is medium-sized and well-formed with a handsome canopy. It is so delicate that to protect it from the sun and keep it from scorching, they plant another tall tree beside it solely to provide shade. This companion is called the mother of the cacao. So from the very beginning, cacao was grown as a food forest, as a polyculture, right? With other trees, with shade trees. So it was never monoculture. And in Mexico still, basically all farms are grown that way, all cacao. Well, and here he mentions that it was brought from Guatemala to Mexico because Mexico didn't produce enough. So nothing new, nothing changed. So yeah, I mean, as you can see, there is not much information concerning the cacao as such, how it was processed. Just this first one gives a hint. All the other writers and conquistadors basically describe the chocolate and how it was processed with a metate, they roasted the cacao, blah, 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 but nobody really mentions how it was processed. I mean, at the farm level. So now we come to the question. Okay, in coffee, we know that, I mean, you can have natural coffee, you can have wash, you can have carbonic macerations, you can have all sorts of, you know, esoteric post-harvest processes. In the case of cacao, basically everybody, as I've said, takes for granted that it's fermented and that's it, right? Actually, you have volumes of how to ferment cacao. The International Cacao Organization, or whatever it's called, gives you like a guide, a report to evaluate quality. And if it's not fermented, it's bad, right? It's not export grade. It's not grade 1. So for them, lavado, it's little more than trash, right? Because it's not fermented. So, okay, then, but there is another post-harvest process called lavado, right? Which is, we will see what it exactly means. I mean, we all know that fermentation is for reduced astringency, reduced bitterness, improve flavor, right? But I mean, we all know that. So fermentation can sometimes go south. But the thing is, it's better flavor at the expense of what? So what are you losing when you ferment? Is there a trade-off? Well, there is a trade-off. I mean, if you ferment, if you compare what a lavado can give you and what fermented gives you, you can lose up to 73% of antioxidants, 71% of flavonoids. Epicatechin is wiped out, which is probably the most important component. You lose it basically entirely. Other flavonols and theobromine, you lose up to 35%, and caffeine also, right? So we will go deeper into where I took this data. But basically, the conclusion is that fermenting dramatically reduces cacao's bioactive compounds. I mean, which makes sense. I'm not the first one saying that. There are a lot of scientific papers, but it's obvious. I mean, what's the closest to a raw bean inside the pod of a cacao tree? Lavado, because it doesn't undergo a heat treatment. Lavado, as we will see in videos, you basically wash the pulp and you dry it. There's some science behind it. There are several techniques of lavado, but it's as close as you can get to the raw bean, right? So when you analyze the raw bean and you ferment it, if somebody has seen a box of fermentation, it's very hot, and you see the juice draining, right? So when the juice of the pulp is draining, you are losing something there. You are cooking the cacao. I mean, what's fresher, a heirloom tomato or one that has been baked inside an oven? So, well, I mean, more vitamins, the fresh one, right? So this is basically the trade-off that what we will now see. Well, first, what is lavado, right? We all know that what fermented is. Lavado, nobody really knows what good fermented lavado is. I mean, there's no protocol. There's nothing. So in Mexico, as long as the lavado looks reddish, homogeneous in color, and it's clean, it's good. I mean, pretty easy to see at plain sight. So, but there is a catch here. In lavado, there are ways to wash lavado. You can, it's more how it's, the question is when they wash it, right? Because each farmer follows a different protocol. Usually, farmers, we will start with the videos first. I hope it works so that you can see, and then I explain you the very little change that farmers do when they wash, which changes everything. And you will see. But first, you can you still see the no, you can't. You can still see my drive, Cristina, or you don't?
No, we see the presentation slide where it says what is lavado. That's what we see.
Okay, okay, yeah, because I think I need to share the full screen. I can't share just the. Yeah. One moment. A ver. I think I'll stop sharing, I think, and then I will share my full screen so that you can see the videos. I didn't come. A ver, one moment. Déjame compartir. Pantalla completa. A ver. So now?
Sí.
Vale, a ver. Cacao lavado. Well, first, how you crack the pots. Everybody knows probably. But this is in Chiapas. You need to crack the pots, you extract the beans. So the beginning is pretty much the same as fermented. You need to bring the wet bean somewhere. Nothing changes here. And then you need to wash it. So, one moment. Let's move a little bit. And now they dry. You see on the left, you see the fermented, which is great. And on the right, you see the orange one, which is the lavado, right? But the beginning and the end is the same. This is in Tabasco, right? And this is in Chiapas, which they have plenty of water in Soconusco, so they basically can waste it. They have too much, actually. These are the wet beans. So wash means wash, lavado, lavar in Spanish. So it doesn't look very technical, and it's not. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. One moment. I will stop sharing, and then, okay, back here. One moment. Okay, so you see, from washing cacao is nothing, it's not rocket science. The interesting thing here is that unlike fermented cacao, where you need a lot of farmers, you need a centralized fermentation facility to gather, to collect wet beans from many other farmers. In this case, you can go to the farm level. You can say, this lavado comes from this specific farmer, right? So it's much like coffee, when you have single estate coffees. In the case of cacao, it's much more difficult. You need a big estate. Here with lavado, The interesting thing for farmers is that they can wash 1 kilo at a time, as you can see. So they can do it slowly. So the key here, the most important discovery of the study that we have carried out. Farmers, I mean, we all know that fermentation means that it takes between 6 and 8 days, more or less, average 7. Some people say that criollos take 5. I mean, but it's still the same. You need a fermentation box. You need even some banana leaves, like in Africa, and a heap to ferment. In the case of lavado, as you see, you can wash 1 kilo, nothing happens. But so people crack the pots and they wash, but not everyone washes right away. Usually farmers wait for 2 days. Why for 2 days? Because when you wait for 2 days, the pulp starts breaking down. It starts sort of fermenting, not much, but it's easier to wash because the pulp is already decomposing, liquefying, right? And some farmers, they crack the pots and they wash them the same day of harvest. Well, just by waiting 1 extra day, you are losing a lot of bioactive compounds. So I say again, farmers usually wait for 2 days, but if you wait for 2 days, because if you wait 3, you cannot wait 3 days. If you wait 3, it already smells like vinegar because you are entering the lactic phase of fermentation, right? So you cannot interrupt fermentation at day 3. It will taste like vinegar. And you can, so that's basically, it's between 1 and 2 days. When you start washing the cacao is key, as we will see. But first, I will give you a brief story of how I ended up working with universities to understand lavado. Because, I mean, I've been working with cacao in Mexico for 8 years. I always saw lavado around because farmers wash it, but I never understood it. I mean, customers abroad told me, no, lavado is rubbish. Don't send me lavado again, man. I mean, this is not good for chocolate. Well, first, lavado is exclusively used for baked cacao-based drinks. In Mexico, nobody makes bars with lavado. Everything is drinks, right? So they were using lavado in a wrong way. But still, my feedback was lavado to the trash, right? So last year, in 2024, out of the blue, a chocolate company in Switzerland contacted me and told me, look, send me lavado samples. I mean, that was strange on its own because nobody knows what lavado is. So that a Swiss company contacts me and asks for lavado was already pretty suspicious. So that's funny because I sent them samples and they told me, wow, these samples are full of flavanols and we want to launch a flavanol-rich chocolate. So we want 2 containers. I mean, I usually couldn't afford to send 2 containers, but everything was very suspicious. And funnily enough, I was talking to the marketing department, right? But the head chemist of the company is married to a woman from Mexico City. So the funny thing is that 1 week after the results came out, the guy was in Mexico City. So we met here. And after a couple of drinks, he confessed and told me, look, that's not true. We're pulling your leg. We don't want the lavado for chocolate. We want the lavado because we have a technology that extracts all the bioactive compounds. I mean, we basically break down the cacao into its components. We set the bioactive compounds aside, and then with the rest, we make chocolate. But the 0.01% that we extract, it's more valuable than what's left. Why? Because they were selling to pharma companies. So pharma companies were buying the extracts, and as you can see, for example, here you have a supplement. It's a supplement that says cocoa flavanols, right? 500 milligrams on the left, of which 85 milligrams are epicatechin, and here the same. So why do they do that? Because, as we will see, there are many health benefits, but some are totally scientifically proved. And among them is cacao helps with blood flow, with cardiovascular health, with muscle regeneration after. That's why high performance athletes take these pills. But long story short, they told me, look, the only cacao that works for these medicines is lavado. Fermented wipes out what we are looking for. So that's why I realized that they were pulling my leg, but I was clever enough to figure out what they were their correct intentions. And I asked myself, why sell pills, or why take pills when you can basically take the chocolate to have the same effects, right? So that's the story of how, after years of running into lavado, I started the journey of understanding it more. Because I have a Swiss company, you know, the Swiss are always behind the money. So that's how I discovered that maybe we were striking gold. Okay, so that's when I started the research project, okay? And the research project, basically, we tested for theobromine, caffeine, epicatechin, catechin, flavonoids, procedinin, and antioxidants, okay? On raw cacao, husks, nibs, different temperatures, paste, butter, everything. So here we will focus on roasted nibs, okay? Just to keep it simple, because otherwise it will take forever. And we compare Tabasco, Chiapas, and as you will see here, lavado that was washed the same day of harvest, and regular lavado, which usually means that they wait for 2 days and then fermented, right? And we use several techniques, as you can see here, spectrometry, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's impossible to pronounce. So these red dots are the maximum levels that you can get, that we got. And as you can see, the sooner you wash the cacao, the more, I mean, the more you get out of everything, right? Lavado tradicional, you also already see a drop, and in fermented, you see a bigger drop. Let's remember, fermented means 7 days of harvest or of fermentation. Wash means 1 day. You just harvest it and you wash it the same day. And traditional means waiting for 2 days, you let it rest inside the bag, and you already see a drop. Okay? So yeah, let's go to the different components.
Sí.
But that's, sorry? Something
Don't
else.
worry,
Something?
don't worry.
Okay. So that's one of the main discoveries. You know, just 1 day extra, the cacao is already fermented. You already see, I mean, it ferments, but a little. But this little, look the drop of everything, right? So, for example, let's go to antioxidants, okay? First, what this means. SL means Soconusco lavado, o sea, Chiapas lavado. TL means Tabasco lavado, right? 100 and 130 means that the nibs, well, the cacao was roasted up to an end of roasting temperature of 100 degrees Celsius or 130. We all know that you cannot go much higher than 130 degrees Celsius when you roast, because you are going to burn the cacao. This is bean temperature. It's not ambient temperature of oven or roaster temperature. It's bean temperature. So the first thing you see, roasting doesn't really affect much. So sorry about the raw chocolate movement, but I don't know where they get the conclusions that not roasting is better, because you don't see it here. But we're talking about antioxidants, okay? Trolox milligram per gram. This is lavado 1 day of Soconusco and Tabasco, more or less the same. Soconusco has a little bit higher. This is the spread. So of course, roasting it lighter has you get more antioxidants. And look at this. This is 4,500. Red wine has 2,500. This is almost double of red wine, and tea doesn't have that much. But then lavado tradicional, look at the drop. Okay? And then fermented. Fermented, you know, pretty standard. You have already lost everything. So it doesn't matter if it's Tabasco or Soconusco, you already lost basically everything that cacao has. But it doesn't go below, no? I mean, once you reach a level, you can lose more. Sorry, and then again to theobromine. The same goes for theobromine. Lavado one day, lavado tradicional, fermented. You see the drops. Okay. Again, roasting, you lose a little. You know, you go from, but still. Interesting about theobromine. It's a stimulant and vasodilator that stays in the body, you know, but usually its effects are often confused with those of sugar, because people take sugar with chocolate. So you don't really know if this stimulation comes from the sugar or from the theobromine. But if you drink a lot of pure lavado, you do feel the theobromine. That's why I have customers in the US that offer sell ceremonial cacao, and many people that buy that, it's a coffee substitute, you know. So that's a very interesting market. People are addicted to coffee, and this kind of product can help them get rid of coffee and drink chocolate. Theobromine, which is a more gentle stimulant, right? But the conclusion is the same. Lavado, boom. You see, it's fermented again back in the corner, and this is nearly grams per 100 grams. Okay. So let's go. Caffeine, the same thing. Although caffeine, look at the difference here. We range from 13 to 21. And in caffeine, you go from 0.1 to 0.5, sorry, to 2.5. So much lower caffeine. It has like less than 10% or 10% the caffeine, but still it has caffeine. Actually, it's one of the few plants in the Americas where you can find both theobromine and caffeine inside the same plant, right? Okay, so, but again, the conclusion, the same. And now, a little bit of, this is like, how do you call that in English? It's like a matryoshka, a Russian matryoshka, right? Where you have smaller puppets inside the bigger one. Well, here's the same. So just for you to know what's what and where we are, just a brief explanation. You have polyphenols. Inside polyphenols, you have flavonoids. Inside flavonoids, you have flavanols. Inside flavanols, you have catechin, epicatechin, and prochidinine. Okay? So now back to the health benefits. Because now we have talked about antioxidants, theobromine, and caffeine, but that's not in here. That's something else. We already know what theobromine does, caffeine, and we all know that antioxidants, the more you get, the better, because it reduces oxidative stress of cells. So now back to this matryoshka, right? So we find that cacao is known to contain very high levels of flavanols that occur both as epicatechin and ecatechin and prochidinins, right? So this is the important thing, the flavanols. The flavanols are commonly associated with cardiovascular health benefits, which include lower rates of morbidity and mortality due to stroke and heart attack, improved vascular endothelial function, reduction in blood pressure, and increases in HDL cholesterol. Actually, the European Union claims cocoa flavanols help maintain the elasticity of blood vessels, which contributes to normal blood flow. That's a health claim from the European Union. And they follow. The claim can be used only for cocoa beverages or for dark chocolate which provide at least a daily intake of 200 milligrams of cocoa flavanols degree of polymerization. Well, I mean, this level is not very high, you know. You can probably get that with fermented, but the thing is that this like EU statement came thanks to a big multinational that claimed that they wanted to launch high flavanol chocolate. Eventually they didn't, I think, but that's how it stayed. But long story short, the only place in the world where an authority claims that is the European Union. So you can use it, okay? So now that we know what's what, you know, the higher the flavonoids you have, the higher everything else. We go back and we see that again, flavonoids, which is like the big matryoshka, lavado one day, again, the highest. Then comes lavado regular and then fermented again. And the same. Oh, first, this cacao is the same. It's the same cacao that was washed and fermented. It's the same farmers, the same genetics, the same everything. So to compare, right? Again, roasting affects a little, not much, but it does. What affects is how you process it. So fermented goes right to the bottom. Epicatechin, let's stay with this one because epicatechin is probably the most important. As you remember, when you take these pills, they are mentioning epicatechin, right? 85 milligrams, because epicatechin, flavonoids are important. Flavonols are also important, but the biggest flavonol is epicatechin, the most important one, the one that even pills tell you the content, right? So coming back to the epicatechin, and here, surprise, roasting does affect. Look at the drop. So con musco lavado one day, 100 degrees, 130, you see a big drop in epicatechin. So roasting didn't matter until the smallest piece of the puzzle that happens to be the most important one. Again, fermented, the fermented gang, team is at the corner again, but epicatechin, you look at the drop of when you roast, right? You lose. So roasting greatly affects epicatechin. And well, first, epicatechin and catechin are opioid receptors. So it floods your brain with endorphins. So it's good for that. I mean, let's go in a hurry because I'm already well behind the time I was supposed to have, I think. Okay, so this is epicatechin again, same thing. Lavado, the difference, but here roasting matters. Catechin the same, although epicatechin is more important. Procyadenine, we are going to skip this. It's another flavanol, more or less the same. Okay, this is not new, okay? The research we have done, you have dozens of papers that probably nobody cared about. You have a lot of papers, but the thing with these papers is that they say, oh yeah, we compare unfermented and fermented. Yeah, but unfermented how? Fermented how? From where? Was it the same unfermented and fermented? No, it wasn't. So you already know with ivory tower scientists that they carry out research with not much practical application. And all these papers and several more that I read suffer from the same problem. Okay, that they are not specific enough. They are not telling you what they did. So this data, it's a little bit pointless, although the conclusion is the same. Fermentation reduces everything. Okay, so I wanted to check how much that everything was, and it's a lot. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think wait. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. I didn't. I had another slide, but I didn't add it. I don't know why. But okay, so conclusion. The conclusion is we can talk about now with the question and answers. I'm sure there are questions about that because the slide I didn't add to this version is what you can do with lavado, which kind of products, So it's interesting. It has a lot of uses, but I hope that the conclusion is clear, right? If you want to focus on health benefits, I mean, unfermented cacao, high quality unfermented cacao is the way to go. Because you basically, when you see reports about, oh yeah, dark chocolate is good for health, blah, 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 usually or more, in some cases, they take the data from the raw seed and they assume that it's transferred to the chocolate, and it's not necessarily true. So even lavados, you can have, usually some farmers wash one day, wash 2 days, nobody tells them how it's good or wrong, but the difference is big, as you can see. So yeah, that's basically the presentation. I'm sure that with the question and answers, we will cover other things too, like the products that I forgot. But now it's your turn, Cristina.
Okay, we have a few questions. Are you ready? Also, thank you for the presentation. That was super interesting. Okay, let's start with the first one. Can lavado beans be sprouted again?
Be what?
Sprouted again?
No. No. I mean, as we saw, sorry, the beginning and the end of lavado is the same as fermented. You start from wet beans and you end by drying them. So you can sprout them. I mean, it's I forgot the name of the germ, it's dead.
Okay, but you can't sprout it again.
Mm.
When you wash the beans and you also lose the mucílago, do you also lose aromas, and what happens to flavor?
Yeah, I mean, flavor is totally different, okay? Here, well, here with lavado, as you don't have any flavor development in fermentation, other variables come into play, interestingly enough. So there are no two lavados that are the same, okay? I've seen that flavor changes depending on the altitude matters a lot. The higher the altitude, the stronger the flavor, the more bitter. Also, genetics play a big role. You know, I've washed pure lava, pure criollo, and it's zero bitter and not very astringent, right? So that's why probably the ancient civilizations, they probably washed criollo. They didn't have to deal with bitterness or high astringency. Fermentation probably came when forastero varieties or non-criollo varieties started being used, which are stronger in flavor. They have more tannins, right? They are purple when they're fresh, so they had to be fermented. But pure criollo washed, I mean, you can even eat it right away. So long story short, the flavor is totally different. It's a different scale. I mean, I want to compare it with the specialty coffee. You have the Q graders that grade Arabica, but then you have R graders that grade Robusta. It's a different scale. I mean, you look for different things. So the flavor profile is totally different. You know, I mean, that's why people recommend that lavado is only fit for purpose for drinks, because usually in drinks, you look for different things than a bar. In bars, you look for complexity, for subtle flavors. In a drink, you don't look for that. If you melt the best, most complex bar in the world, and you turn it into drinking chocolate, it will be tasteless, it will be bland, because flavors are watered down. So in lavado, you don't have that. So long story short, it's a different scale. You know, the good thing is that you can play with different farms, because you can source from single farmers like coffee, and actually some lavados are good for bars, like more criollo ones. But long story short, totally different scale, totally different protocols, totally different way of evaluating the quality, right?
Okay. Elsa wrote a question. Elsa, correct me if I'm understanding it right. She says if in the traditional lavado they wait a couple of days before washing them, it begins to ferment, since fermentation begins as the pod is recently opened.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's true. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, it's true. It starts fermenting. I mean, but they wait because it's easier to remove the pulp. When the first day it's very sticky. If you wait, the microbes start already breaking down the pulp, so it's easier for them. But it doesn't really ferment, because for fermentation you need more, you know. So, but the chemical changes already start. You know, the flavor doesn't change at all between 1 day and 2, but the chemical composition does. So that's what we discovered.
Okay. And what about cadmium, mercury, and lead levels in lavado?
It doesn't really change much.
Okay.
So, well, according to the tests, well, in Mexico, we don't have any cadmium and any much cadmium and lead and things like that. So it doesn't really change. I mean, we compare the same ferment and the same lavado, it's the same.
Okay. And Paul's question. More flavonols and more procyanin in Tabasco, but more epicatenin in Soconusco. Does that have a relationship with the fact that there are more criollos in Soconusco compared to Tabasco?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I mean, there are so many variables involved. Soconusco is more criollo always than Tabasco, always. I thought that because Tabasco is more trinitario with some forastero, more purple, we will get higher levels of everything compared to Soconusco, which is more criollo. I thought, okay, criollo white means less of everything, and it's not true. I thought that bitterness, when fresh, was related to bioactive compounds, and it's absolutely unrelated. So I think that it has more to do with the fact that Soconusco, the cacao is grown at higher altitudes than Tabasco. Again, we need to do more research. I have mentioned that we are developing pocket size measuring device that will allow us. I mean, the point of the presentation of this research was to fine-tune a device that will allow us to measure some of these components on site with rapid tests. You know, so it will enable us to play around more with what affects. I think that the thing is altitude, because the more, I mean, if the trees under more stress, apparently more cold, you know, and things like that, probably this stress and makes the tree to develop more of these bacterial components, but we don't really know.
Okay. Maybe I'll tie it to his next question, which was, I'm translating, más potente en salud? Is it a trinitario healthier than a criollo?
Again, we don't know. It's a good question. The thing is that you don't really know what's pure trinitario or criollo. Everything is usually mixed. So, but the good thing with lavado is that you can wash isolated varieties, but most likely it will be tricky for you to ferment isolated varieties. This is another interesting question, because we don't know if it's altitude, genetics, what affects. I mean, by default, washing or fermenting affects a lot. Between the same washed cacao, you can wash different varieties from different altitudes, different soils. We don't know. But one thing is true, by default, doesn't matter what you have in front of you. If you wash it, you will get the most.
Okay. To be exported, does the cacao lavado also need to be as dry as the fermented cacao, meaning under 8% moisture?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's the same. In terms of, I mean, harvesting is the same. Obviously, post-harvest isn't. Drying is the same. And packing and cleaning and moisture is the same. So, I mean, if it's properly dried and stored, the shelf life is still a lot. So it's the same like fermented.
Okay, and this kind of ties into what you said before, that you mostly use lavado for a beverage, even though you still can roast it.
I mean, you have to roast it.
Yeah.
What I've shown here, why did I choose 100 and 130 degrees Celsius? I mean, I'm following the very generous theory of roasting from Chocolate Alchemy that you probably all know. It's a good friend of mine. It actually was my first customer many years ago, and he developed like a roasting theory with different roasting phases, right? You have the drying phase, you have the development phase, and so on and so forth. And basically, I mean, if you don't go beyond 100 degrees Celsius, you are not really roasting anything. You are removing, well, you are removing moisture, but that's the minimum, you know, the absolute minimum. Whereas 130 degrees, I'm talking about bean temperature, okay? Above 130 degrees, if you go to 135 or something like that, you're burning the fat. So I'm taking both extremes, you know? So what was the conclusion? It doesn't really matter much how you roast, except for epicatechin. You know, epicatechin does go down a lot if you roast very strong. But in the other things, there's not much. There is not much. How do you say effect?
Okay. I have a lot of questions. I'll try and go as through them as fast as possible. The prebiotic effects of fermentation, are these affected in cacao lavado?
What do you mean with probiotic?
Lisa, I don't know if you want to explain more about your question. She says the prebiotic effects of fermentation, are these affected? If you want to unmute yourself. No?
I mean, maybe, well, maybe she's muted, or I don't know.
I think, during fermentation, you have all the bacteria that come in to increase fermentation process. I think that has a prebiotic effect as well. I think that's what Lisa means, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, my take on this is, cacao is a fermented food, but I mean, it's a different kind of fermentation compared to other foods, right? So it's different. You cannot compare, I don't know, pickles or something like that, or vegetables that have been fermented, sauerkraut, and cacao is different. But if the question is about the bioavailability, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to measure bioavailability. Here we are talking about raw content, gross content. So in terms of gross content, lavado beats fermented. If the little amount left in fermentation after in fermented cacao is more bioavailable, I don't know. I don't even know how to measure that, honestly.
Yeah. Emma, I can see that you're connected. So if you want to also help me with your question, it says, what about the anti-nutrients in raw cacao? Have you considered their impact on health?
The what?
The anti-nutrients like phytates and oxalates.
Anti-nutrients? No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I didn't know that such thing existed. Anti-nutrients. I have no answer. So I don't know. But it would be interesting to know. I will take a look. But it's interesting also, the anti-nutrients. If the person knows which ones, I can take a look.
Emma, do you want to share something about that?
Sure. I'm no expert in this, but it's like in my tastings, I talk about like that fermentation reduces those anti-nutrients, and they will lessen like absorption of some minerals. So I'm thinking if that will influence also maybe the impact on health and but like also, yeah, that's all. It does contain these things that, yeah.
It's a good question, because actually in some, I read like a stupid amount of papers, and in one of the papers, they do mention that mineral absorption is higher in fermented. So if they compare a balance between different health benefits, fermented could beat lavado in minerals, although, I mean, the mineral content is not, I mean, cacao doesn't really stand out from other foods when you talk about minerals, but that was one of the cases where fermented did beat lavado. But I can't remember specifically what did they say, but I think it was the availability of minerals, something like that. I need to check, but I'm sure that they mentioned that was the only case where fermented did actually beat lavado.
Okay, thank you. And then Jenny says, doesn't the total amount of antioxidants increase after roasting due to synthesis of new antioxidants during roasting?
Good question. Actually, I haven't shown that. I didn't show that, but it's true. But up to some point, roasting slightly does affect antioxidants a little. I mean, that's increase them, but then it goes down again if the roast is too strong. I have just taken the two extremes. Okay, it doesn't change that much, but it goes like more or less like that, right? So you start more or less it's so. It goes so and then back there. So if you stay in the middle, you roast it a little, but you don't go that much, but it's a trade-off because you do have more antioxidants, but you lose the epicatechin, right? So by roasting lightly, you already have a lot of antioxidants. So it's a trade-off. But yes, the answer is yes. If you roast it halfway through, both extremes, antioxidants go up.
And what do farmers do with the mucilage? Do they make juice or other products?
Yes, I mean, they do juice. You always have a fridge full of juice bottles that eventually blow up because, you know, it ferments, right? So it's not the first time that they invite me to have a drink and it blows up, right? So yes, they do store it, but it's a pity because you could basically use the pulpers that depulp the bean, and they could make the most of the pulp if they would depulp it in a more controlled environment. So it's a loss, actually. I mean, that's a thing that we are thinking, but it's not just the pulp. You need to pasteurize it, so it's not that easy. But yes, I mean, they could definitely use use it in more ways than just home consumption.
Okay. And then Elsa asks, how do you process the cacao lavado to turn it into a drink? You use the whole beans?
The whole beans, I mean, you process lavado like fermented. I mean, it's the same. You roast it, you winnow it, you turn it into liquor or into products, you grind it. I mean, but fuck, wait. One moment. One moment. Estoy en llamada. Sorry. I told someone 12 p.m., but it's 12 p.m. Mexico time, not Canadian time. So he's calling, he's insisting.
I
Yeah,
also know we've already done the whole hour, so I don't want to take too much of everyone's time.
No, it's no problem.
No?
I mean,
Okay.
I told him 12 p.m. It's 10 p.m. here. So anyway.
So we have 2 more hours.
What was the question? The advantage of lavado is that actually in fermented you do need roasting profiles to enhance flavor and get things. In lavado, roasting doesn't really affect much. So that's one advantage. You cannot roast lavado in a wrong way. Basically, that's the main conclusion. It's very the internet crash. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So lavado is the easiest cacao you can ever process. It doesn't care about roasting. It doesn't care about refining or conching. It doesn't care about anything. Actually, in Mexico, it's processed still in some areas with metates. So go figure how fine the particles are. Or they use in Oaxaca, you go to Oaxaca, and they use stone molinos, you know, that is basically a pre-grinder, and that's it. So it's super flexible. Another thing, it's for drinks, okay? Again, I mean, if you have a time machine and you go back 1,000 years ago to the Mayas, 2,000 years ago to the Olmecs, of 100 years ago to the Aztecs, no one would ever drink cacao plain, you know, ever. They always added all sorts of crazy ingredients. They had even something called foaming agents. Because I mean, I didn't show you in the first picture you saw in the presentation. It's a Maya king with a cup of 50% of the drink was foam. You know, if you were a chocolate maker, I mean, and you couldn't have any foam in your drink, you were a loser, right? You were a failure. So that's why they use even the seeds of the mamey, flowers that were foaming agents. So now you use ingredients that might increase fluidity, or like the I forgot, lecithin or whatever, or more butter. In ancient times, they wanted foam, okay? And they had no sugar. So they used flowers that were sweet. So long story short, there are a lot of evidence of ancient recipes. And they had sometimes, even now in Mexico, you have a recipe called chocolate atole, which has bicolor cacao. It has over 20 ingredients, and cacao is one of them. And it's supposed to be a cacao-based drinks, but you have rice, you have corn, you have cinnamon, you have all sorts of spices, you have rosita de cacao. It's 23 ingredients or something like that, or 20 ingredients inside one cup. So go figure. So lavado, you can do all sorts of things, but it's easy to process.
I wanted to ask for roasting, because you said previously that roasting, you lose also all the benefits of cacao lavado. So I was a little bit,
No, I didn't say that. I said that you don't really lose much when you roast, except in one case, epicatechin. I mean, you always see drops comparing the same lavado between 100 and 130. You see that a drop, but this drop is negligible. I mean, you don't lose much. You probably lose, I don't know, 5% of theobromine or something like that, or less. In epicatechin, you do lose a lot. So, I mean, but that's a recommendation. I'm comparing both two extremes. I'm comparing 100 degrees bean temperature, which means doing not much, and 130, which means maximum. So in the middle you have a lot of options, right? But the conclusion is try to roast as lightly as possible. That's basically the main conclusion. But you have to roast.
Okay. Iveta asks, what about, don't know if I'm going to say this right, phenylethylamine should be the substance causing the high feeling, and it should grow with roasting. Is this true?
I don't know this. Pheny what?
The high feeling caused by phenylethylamine.
Phenylethylamine, I have no phenylethylamine, I have no idea what this is. Phenylethylamine, I read it down. I don't know.
PEA. This is what she says should be the substance causing the sort of high feeling.
I mean,
and it supposedly increases when you roast cocoa beans. Do you know if this is true?
I have no idea. But one thing is sure, epicatechin and catechin are affect endorphin receptors. So you do want more epicatechin and catechin. Actually, it's probably true because interestingly enough, epicatechin turns into catechin when roasting. So maybe I didn't cover that, but you see catechin, which is less important anyway, has less content, goes up when epicatechin goes down. Okay, so epicatechin roasting, strong roasting means less epicatechin but more catechin, although it doesn't offset the drop, right? So probably I can take a look into it, because I mean, again, this is raw data. We don't really know the impact on how you feel, but it's probably true. It's probably true. I mean, again, epicatechin goes down with roasting, catechin goes up, but not to this extreme, and both affect endorphin receptors. So it's probably, I will take a look.
Okay, this is what Gunter says. It's phenylethylamine, PEA, is present in cacao. It's a biogenic amine found in cacao beans, and it's known as the love molecule because it's produced in the brain when someone experiences feelings of love. So PEA is believed to contribute to mood-boosting effects associated with chocolate consumption by stimulating the release of dopamine.
Okay. Probably. I will take a look. It's interesting. I mean, ancient Mesoamerican civilizations always roasted cacao, always. So, and if you roast cacao in a pan, how do you call it? In Mexico, fuck, how is it called?
El comal?
Comal. In a comal, I mean, I bet it's the least precise roasting method you can imagine. So it was roasted. I mean, this raw chocolate movement made no sense among ancient civilizations.
Okay. Well, maybe one last question. Ido says, do lavado beans cost less because they don't pass through fermentation phase?
Cost less? Good question. I mean, one of the greatness of lavado is that farmers are more involved. You can't ask farmers to ferment and then you collect the beans. It's a disaster. So you need a fermentation facility, you need a centralized fermentation facility, you need workers, you need fermentation can go wrong. So you need infrastructure. In the case of lavado, I mean, you can do it also, obviously, but if you trust farmers enough, they can do it themselves. So actually they make more money while you save money. And they are busy, not all year long, but you know, in fermentation, you need peak harvests. You need enough wet beans at a time to ferment. In lavado, you don't. You can wash 1 kilo, which also opens up the possibility to play around more with flavors, you know, with genetics, because you can ask the farmer, look, these criollo trees, wash them all, you know? So you can play around with lots more because it makes more sense. They are less costly, a little bit less, yes, a little bit less costly, but it depends on, I mean, you save money because you need to process, but farmers charge you more, you know, because it's labor also. So it depends. In slow quantities, probably it's less expensive, but I mean, it depends.
Okay. Well, I know we've gone over time, but I do want to be mindful of everyone's time as well. I don't want to be the person that chooses the last question. So if anyone has one burning question, please unmute yourself and speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, we will say goodbye to Alejandro. So if anyone has one last question, please feel free to say so. And if not?
How much per day?
Hola.
Hola, muy buenas. Hola, Alejandro. Aquí Norberto de Riga. Hi, everyone.
Hola, Norberto. ¿Qué tal?
I do have a question regarding to ceremonial cacao.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty much hype here also in Latvia. So, according to my understanding, ceremonial cacao should be lavado, no?
I mean, it's a good question. It's something that I should have mentioned in the slide about products that I missed. I mean, let's be honest. Nobody knows what ceremonial cacao is. So it's a very vague concept. And people just claim my paste is ceremonial, but they don't give you many arguments besides the spiritual ones, which I mean, neither support nor I really understand. So one thing is sure, where did ceremonies take place? Because cacao was ceremonial. Actually, the word cacao had summoning powers. I mean, it was used in ceremonies, right? Where did you have ceremonies? In Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and maybe Honduras. So where cacao was domesticated. Actually, when you read the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Maya, like the Bible of the Maya, they mention cacao. It's part of their how do you say, cosmovision or whatever you want to call it. So it was used as actually it was only ceremonial until the arrival of the Spaniards. People think that when the Spaniards came to the Americas, indigenous people were drinking chocolate. They weren't. First, because it was money, and secondly, because it was a drink restricted to the priests and to nobility. So most of the everyday life drinks in Mexico took place after the conquest, right? So coming back to the ceremonial thing, I wanted to give a definition to what I understand as ceremonial. So if you go to the historical perspective, ceremonial cacao would be cacao, probably, if you want to talk about origins, from Central America or Mexico, because that's where cacao was praised. You know, I mean, cacao has been cultivated for 4,000 years. Cacao left the Americas 300 years ago when the Spaniards shipped it from Mexico to the Philippines. You know, that's the first time that cacao left the Americas. So after that, it went to Indonesia and 200 years ago to Africa. But for 95% of its history, it stayed in the Americas. And just some civilizations, because nobody thinks that the Incas processed any cacao, although they had it probably, you know. So in my take is that if you want to call it ceremonial, you need to give some historical basis to that, right? And I would use cacao from either Central America or Mexico, but all this presentation wanted to solve one doubt, and is what the heck did these ancient civilizations consume? And we still don't know, you know, because for example, in Ecuador 5,000 years ago, or in Soconusco 4,000 years ago, you do find theobromine traces, but you don't find any stone tools to process cacao. So we think that they were brewing the pulp. They were turning the pulp into alcohol. But you do find in Mexico stones, the same tools that were used for corn were used for cacao. So the first time that chocolate was produced was probably in Mexico, right? Because you do find these stone tools. So long story short, my take on ceremonial is it has to be lavado because it looks like the most historically accurate process. And keep in mind, you are 2,000 years ago, you couldn't afford to lose many nutrients, right? So what was the point of fermenting for them? Especially when they were using criollo non-bitter cacao. You know, I mean, well, you will hear about that soon. But I'm shipping an order to crafting markets with pure criollo cacao from Soconusco, pure white, almendra blanca, and zero bitters, zero. It has no.
To cut it short, as I know, most of the cacao on the market is fermented. So if they sell ceremonial cacao, it's fermented, then it's not authentic then.
But I mean, authentic, what's authentic? I mean, if it's fermented cacao from, I don't know, Madagascar, and you say it's ceremonial, yeah, why? Because it's dark. Exactly. I mean, it's how you can defend your claim. The problem is that some people don't defend the claim I mean, they just focus on the spiritual aspect, which is fine, but give me a reason, right? So I'm giving two reasons: historical accuracy and health benefits.
I see. Thank you. Hi.
The more reasons you give to defend your claim, the better, I guess. I mean, but probably it's a bubble that will pop. I don't know.
Well, thank you.
I think we have to keep that in the middle, right? Or maybe ask ChatGPT, because then we know it's true. All right. Well, I think it was very interesting and super informative, Alejandro. And I think we can take it all back home and, pick our brains whenever we go into making a new recipe. I heard 28 different ingredients in a recipe when they used to make the chocolate drink. So enough to choose from. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much, Alejandro, for taking the time to do this. And you know, in case you have more questions, then
the slide was about different products. For example, if you have a butter press and you press cocoa, I mean, I will keep it very short because we also analyze butter. I haven't covered it here, okay? But long story short, butter is the same, more or less the same than fermented. It's a little bit better, the butter from Lavado, but the cocoa powder, cocoa powder, sometimes you don't know what to do with it. Cocoa powder from Lavado skyrockets in all things, because keep in mind that butter doesn't carry any of these compounds. You know, you don't lose anything. Everything stays in the solid. So if you offer cocoa powder extracted from Lavado, the powder has much more value. While you can use the butter.
Presentation, and thank you everyone for joining, and talk to you soon. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
bye.